YouTube, how are we doing today? Hope everybody's having a fantastic evening. Thank you so much for checking out another episode of Esports Analysis. Today, if you missed it, there was an episode of the Eavesdrop podcast with Hex from the Chicago Huntsman. He had on Hastro from the Dallas Empire. He had on Priesta and Crowder from the Atlanta FaZe. He had on the commissioner of the CDL, and he also had on the owner and Shawnee from the London Royal Ravens. It was an incredible episode. There were so many things in there. I could make a week's worth of videos just on the stuff that was inside of that podcast. But the biggest thing that I wanted to touch on today was a couple of the points that Joanna Ferries made. Again, Joanna Ferries, the CDL commissioner, came over from the NFL. If you haven't seen this, make sure you go see it at length in its entirety. It's a really good watch, but she made a lot of really good points. Hex did ask some pretty tough questions. He asked her about the transition from being on LAN over to online Call of Duty, and she talks about all the different aspects that really go into that. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you guys listen to her because she can definitely explain it better than I can. And then afterwards, we'll come back and we'll have a little bit of a discussion. And then they also talked about being that middleman between, you have the developers, you have the organizations, you have the players, you have the league, right? There are all these different entities that come together and everybody has something that they want. And Hex and Joanna both made super good points about what really happens in between there. So first, let's hear her response to the transition to online Call of Duty, and then we'll move forward after that.
I want you to tell me how hard it was, right, from both sides, from the league side and the ownership side, to all come to an agreement to pivot to online gaming. Because you guys wanted it to be on LAN, I wanted it to be on LAN. Some people want it to be online, and obviously a global pandemic, unexpected thing. They literally, and at the worst possible time, which is the inaugural season of the most important, almost facet of our lives for me, is, obviously because of I love Call of Duty, but they sort of threw a wrench in the middle of this thing, and all of a sudden we have to make these like incredibly harsh decisions, right? Ultimately, we ended up all coming together and picking the right thing, but it took a while to come to that conclusion.
Yes, it did. And I think it's important that what you just said about that, it took a while. Because it points to the fact this isn't a dynamic that I'm not interested in creating a dynamic that's either top down, the league office has declared, right? That's not the business we're in. But we also need all this input. We need input that may be intuitive. We need input that's like, where's the blind spots? We need to iterate on that. We need to test on that. And yeah, when you're already working from an imperfect place, you're never going to there's no right outcome. There's just a consensus driven outcome that everybody's aligned to, that everybody can say, okay, I had a chance to weigh in. I understand why we're here. I had an opportunity to, cast a vote. And we're going to make the best of this. Like I talk about this with my team all the time. It's never going to be about agreement 100%. You're never going to get 100% agreement. You got to get 100% alignment. Every day there are times where I have to align to an outcome that I don't particularly personally agree with, or I may have not drawn the play that way. But when you're aligned, it's war, right? Like we at the league office are also fighting battles on behalf of this ecosystem that people don't see every hour of the day. And it's for the betterment of this league. It's for the betterment of you guys, what you're building. It's for the betterment of supporting our players. And that's a thankless job, and that's okay. That's what people sign up for here. That's not, that goes with the territory. But I would say I too had to sort of check even personal preferences at the door and say, we need to just make sure the right voices are talking about this. We need to make sure that we've thought about this across not just a competitive line item, but a business implication line item, a PR implication line item, tech, there's just so much that goes into that. And so I'm just proud of the league because we're constantly working in these types of imperfections. Our backs are often against the wall and we lock arms and we talk about it and we push through.
All right. So just in that section, that was a really extended answer, and there's a ton to break down, but a few things that I want to focus on that she mentioned. First of all, right out of the gates, she came out and she said, this is not the league office says this, so that's what's going to happen, right? This really does take input from the organizations and the players and the tech side of things and the league, and it's very clear to me that there are a ton of people working together. And even this is just something that I thought about from like 3 months ago. They had a meeting with the players, with the organizations, just over things like, do we want to continue to play domination or do you want to switch it up to something else, right? So it's clearly not the league saying, this is how it's going to be. You guys are all going to fall in line. And this is just what the important people at the top say. So I really did like that initial approach, just that they're willing to listen to all sides, hear from everybody, and then move on in a manner that best suits everybody. The next thing that I want to go ahead and point out, and this is a point that really does apply whether you're talking to Call of Duty, you're talking about an esport, you're talking about a business, you're talking about an organization. This applies in far more places than just in competitive Call of Duty from the league structure. But she says the most important thing is that you're not always going to agree on an outcome, but you always have to have alignment, right? So say you get into a board meeting and there's 15 people in there and 8 people think one way and 7 people think another. And eventually it comes down to, okay, we're going to go with what the 8 people said. So there are 7 people that don't necessarily agree with the outcome of this conversation. But when everybody gets on board and they become aligned and they all work towards a common goal, that's exactly what you saw with the move to online. It wasn't perfect. That's not what the spectators want. It's not what the players wanted, but it's a global pandemic. This stuff happens once every 100 years, right? It's not like there's been a blueprint for this. So after she made that statement, she says, look, there's a PR stance from this that has to be figured out. There's a competitive integrity stance from this that has to be figured out. There's a tech stance from this that has to be figured out. How are you just going to go online when online has 12 hertz servers? Well, then they went and they put in 60 hertz servers, and then there weren't enough, so they had them in different regions. And I get it. It's really easy to bash the league. It's really easy to just go into the CDL chats on game day and say, we want the CWL back and all of that stuff. But I really do think that in the grand scheme of things, they've done a really nice job. It is what it is. They could have just canceled the season and we would be stuck here not seeing anything. That matchup between Chicago and OGLA wouldn't have happened. And then where would we be, right? So at least we get to watch Call of Duty. It does seem like the majority of the kinks have been figured out, and we have championship weekend upon us. So it's the best that they can do. It's the best that we can expect out of the given situation. So let's appreciate it for what it is. The next thing that they talk about here, and this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily take into consideration, is that when things go wrong with Call of Duty, such as a patch with the MP5 just a few days before championship weekend, there are so many different stances that come into play, right? You have the developers, you have the league, you have the organizations, you have the players, and everybody has to come together. And it's really hard to work between what happens with the league, what happens with the developers, what the players are feeling like. That's a lot of voices that have to come together as one and work towards a common goal. So they talk about what that's like. With that in mind, let's just listen to this conversation real quick, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards.
You know, I always say that you guys are in a tough position because you guys are literally trying to be the sort of middleman, middlewoman of what us and the players are saying versus what the developer and the artists of the game want, right? And to find that median, I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get there ever, right? Like it may not happen. When you put creativity, artistic sort of attachment to a project, as these artists that create these video games do. And look, I've always said it from the beginning of time, I'll be tough where I can be, but as an artist myself, like, Call of Duty never set out to be a sport, right? These were a group of artists that put a digital realm together and, drew a whole bunch of soldiers and created sort of the storyline. And they never, not once, not ever, not you, not Activision, not the game publishers, not anyone, said, all right, we're going to make this an entertainment property, but it is also a sport, right?
Totally.
So for us to find the happy medium where we let the artists be artists and fulfill their, I mean, in no other world, and I mean this, in no other ecosystem, in no other artistic genre would you ever go to Banksy for whatever it's worth. Banksy would say, Banksy, don't do a stencil this time. Do a, use a marker instead of spray paint on this. Or, you don't offer that input into an artist's creation, where here is completely different. The artist goes out and creates this world, and here's the league, here are the team owners, here are the very voiceless players, and say, yeah, paint it the other way. So it's like a difficult. So how hard is you managing both expectations on both sides? Because that has to be like your number one. Like it is the toughest thing.
I love your metaphor. That's gonna stay with me. It really is. I'm gonna think about that a little bit because it's wise to put it that way, and it's right. And I think you're being very sympathetic, and I think that's important. And driving more empathy, frankly, is at least as important to the job and the outcomes I think we're going to see in the future here as anything. Because a lot of times it's not malintent. To your point, it's just, hey, I thought we were building a video game. Oh wait, we're doing this too. And as those both evolve as mega opportunities for the same company, it's really about sort of creating the dynamics for understanding, for clarity, what the roles we need to play are, when we're going to get there, how we're going to measure it. So I think a lot of the job, albeit tough, two things. I think me as a professional, I really actually get stimulated by those tension points, provided I think there's a way through. If I felt like it was just like, okay, this is too hard, and there's too much ego, and everybody's all over the map, and we're not going to get alignment, at some point I'm like, I don't really know if we're going to pull this off. Firmly believe we're going to pull it off. Firmly confident in that. And if I can be somebody who sort of galvanizes people to push through those tension points and really create better understanding and alignment, then I think we really blow the door open. Because where I go is, to your point, these have sort of been running in parallel, broadly speaking. The Call of Duty is the franchise and the game experience, and Call of Duty is the esport experience for a long time now. To be able to really say 1 + 1 can equal 3, you cannot convince me that there's a better brand to do it than Call of Duty. You can't.
So look, guys, just to kind of reiterate their points, I just wish that in the community there was a little bit more understanding. Now, that does change a little bit because we do have a franchise league where all these different teams have played $25 million in order to buy into this league. So there should be a little bit more attention paid to what's going on the competitive side of things. And that's really what we're hearing from the players and the organizations and the people in chat. That's the stance that they come from. But I completely agree with them in the fact that if you're a game developer at Infinity Ward, you just have the ideas and you want to see them come to life inside of a game. So when we look at the fact that, wait, Dead Silence isn't a perk. Dead Silence is a field upgrade, and you have to earn it, and you're not going to have it all the time. How is that going to work out with the competitive side of things? We look at it from an esports aspect, and they look at it as, well, capture a point, get a couple kills, then you can go ahead, you can build up your Deady, and then you can use it however you can use it more tactically as you want to move around the map and try to gain positions and stuff like that. So again, just these guys are looking at it as they have ideas. They want to make sure that they're building a game that they're proud of. And when we look at it from the competitive side of things, we are strictly focused on, well, how is this set up? How is the Gunsmith going to work for competitive? How is Dead Silence going to work for competitive? How is Killstreak going to work for competitive, right? So we kind of see everything through that competitive lens, whereas a lot of times they're just trying to build a game that they like and that they love and that they want to be proud of. So if you didn't see this in its entirety, make sure you go check it out. It was a really good episode. I loved what the London Royal Ravens talked about. I loved the conversation between Hex and Hastro, as I usually do. And then Crowder and Priesta really did have some awesome points on what it's like for Atlanta getting ready for champs. So if you're new around here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Any comments on this, put them down below. I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say from the league's point of view on some of these more controversial topics, I guess you could say. So comments down below, leave a like. Thank you guys so much. Tomorrow I will have my champs prediction, so be ready for that video. And with that, we'll see you next time.